I was cleaning my son's room when I found $700 hidden in his shoebox. I immediately called my wife into the room. "Hey, honey, have you seen this?" "Yes, what's the big deal?" "You should be happy our son's saving money." Before I could respond, she walked out. I figured she was just on her period or something TBH. But when our 12-year-old son came home, my wife Talia appeared with the $700, counting it bill by bill when she thought I wasn't looking. "Not enough," she said quietly, then louder, looking at Adonis. "You know what happens if it's not enough." I bit my tongue until the next morning. Talia was giving Adonis 2 white pills with breakfast. "What are those?" "Vitamins," she said, but watched him swallow them like her life depended on it. "They'll help you last longer." That's when his teacher, Mrs. Swan, called me from work. "Mr. Williams, I need to talk to you about Adonis. He's fallen asleep in class 3 times this week. I'll talk to him tonight." "Mr. Williams," she paused. "Is everything okay at home?" Her question swam around my head like a shark. That evening, I tried bringing it up with Talia while she was folding laundry. "Mrs. Swan called about Adonis sleeping in class." She didn't even look up. "Kids need more sleep. Maybe we should get him to bed earlier." "Talia, he went to bed at 7:30 p.m. last night." She finally turned around, and for just a second I saw fear in her eyes, like she was drowning and I was about to find out why. "Just leave it alone, Noah. Please." That night I couldn't sleep. Something was nagging at me, so I went to check our family computer. The Facebook Marketplace was still open. As I scrolled through the sold listings, my heart dropped. Adonis's PlayStation, his bike, the signed baseball from his 10th birthday that he'd treasured. The next morning at breakfast, I watched Adonis try to eat. His split lip made him wince with every bite. Purple bruises crept up from under his collar. "Adonis, who did this to you?" "Nobody did anything to me." But his hands were shaking so bad he dropped his orange juice. Talia grabbed him by the shoulders. "You promised me 3 more months. 3 more months." She was crying now. "I can't lose both of you." I asked if she was okay, and she mumbled something about hormones and menopause. I was in the pickup line that afternoon when Principal Harris approached my car. She leaned into my window before I could even ask about Adonis. "He's fine," she said quickly. "Don't ask questions. Just be grateful." "Mrs. Harris, what?" "Your wife said if we interfere, she'll pull him from school entirely. At least here we can watch him." She was already walking away. When I got home, I cornered Talia in our bedroom. "Something's wrong with Adonis. Really wrong." "Drop it." "Talia, I said drop it." In 15 years of marriage, she'd never screamed at me like that. Then I heard movement from the bathroom. Adonis was hunched over the toilet. The water was pink. He was vomiting blood and trying to flush it away before I could see. "It's nothing, Dad. Just ate something bad." "That's blood. You're throwing up blood." "It's fine." "It's not fine." I grabbed Talia in the hallway. "We're taking him to the hospital. Right now. They'll ask too many questions. They'll take him away from us." Her phone rang. She answered it with shaking hands, then her face went white. "If he dies, it's on you," she hissed into the phone. "You promised me this would save him. You promised me it was the only way." Talia hung up and turned to find Adonis in the doorway. "Mom, it hurts so much when they use me." "Everything hurts." His voice broke on the last word. She pulled him against her, running her fingers through his hair. "I know, baby. I'm so proud of you." She was crying into his hair. "Just 1 more week, then we're done." That's when I decided to check on him later. But at 3 a.m. when I went to his room, his bed was empty, still made. On his pillow was a note. "Dad, if you're reading this, I'm okay. I'll be home by sunrise." I ran to the window just as a sedan pulled into our driveway. Adonis limped out the back door and climbed in. I let the Uber get a block ahead before I started my engine. I thought I was prepared for anything. But I was wrong, because that's when he pulled into Mel's diner. Through the window, I saw him go straight to the back, emerging in an apron and name tag. The night shift waitress hugged him. The cook waved from the kitchen. Everyone knew what he was doing. Everyone except me. I sat in my car, frozen in place, watching my child work. He carried trays loaded with plates that made his arms shake. Truckers 3 times his size barked orders at him. I kicked that door open so hard it slammed into the wall. "That's my 12-year-old son!" Every eye turned to me. The manager stepped back. He said he was 16, had a work permit. "He's 12 years old." An older trucker in the corner booth stood up slowly, deliberately. "We all knew, mister." Every one of us knew. But the kid said it was life or death, said he needed the money to save someone. My world tilted. A waitress was already on her phone. Minutes later, Talia's car screeched into the parking lot. She saw Adonis on the floor and fell apart completely. "I told you weekends only. You promised me. Just weekends, you promised." Adonis was trying to stand, swaying. "Mom, the bills. I had to pay them." "What bills?" I demanded. I looked at my wife's tears, my son's blood on the floor, and felt my whole world crashing down. "Noah, you have cancer." The word cancer hung in the air like smoke while I stared at the blood pooling under Adonis on the dirty diner floor. My legs went weak and I grabbed the doorframe, suddenly understanding why I'd been so tired lately, why I'd lost 20 pounds without trying, why there was blood in the toilet that I kept telling myself was just hemorrhoids. Adonis tried to push himself up, but his arms gave out, and he collapsed back down, more blood dripping from his split lip onto the cracked linoleum. The cook was already on the phone, and within minutes, red lights were flashing through the window as the ambulance pulled up. The paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, and I pointed at Adonis, telling them to take him first while I helped Talia to her feet. She was shaking so bad she could barely walk, kept saying the same thing over and over about not knowing what else to do. I followed the ambulance in my car with Talia crying in the passenger seat, her hands covering her face the whole drive. At the emergency room, they wheeled Adonis straight through the double doors, while a nurse with a camera started taking pictures of his split lip and the bruises climbing up his neck. The triage nurse asked me how he got hurt, and I told her everything about finding him at the diner, about the truckers who knew, about him working illegal night shifts. Talia seemed to get smaller with every word I said, sliding down in the plastic waiting room chair. The ER doctor came out after an hour saying they needed blood work and a CT scan because Adonis had been throwing up blood. His hemoglobin was at 7.2, way below normal for a kid his age, and they were talking about keeping him overnight for observation. A woman in a blazer appeared with a clipboard and introduced herself as a social worker from the hospital. Roman Reyes from CPS showed up before we even finished the paperwork, a tall man with a badge who separated us into different rooms for interviews. He asked me about school attendance and work schedules, writing everything down in a small notebook. When I mentioned Principal Harris knew about this, his pen stopped moving, and he looked up at me with hard eyes. In the other room, I could hear Talia crying through the thin walls as she talked to another CPS worker. Later, she told me she admitted finding mail from my doctor 3 months ago when I was at work, test results I'd hidden in my desk drawer. The insurance had lapsed when I switched jobs 6 weeks ago, and she panicked about the bills, thought she could handle it secretly until the new coverage kicked in next month. Brady Novak, the hospital social worker, sat with me in a small office while Adonis was getting his CT scan, spreading out forms for charity care programs across the desk. He explained each application slowly, showing me where to sign, telling me about payment plans and financial assistance I never knew existed. His kindness hit me hard because it made me realize how much trouble we were really in, how much help we actually needed. That evening, while Adonis slept with an IV in his arm, I sat in the bathroom stall and finally let myself think about all the signs I'd ignored. The exhaustion that made me fall asleep at red lights, the blood I kept seeing and pretending wasn't there, the stomach pain I took ibuprofen for every morning. Talia had found the test results I'd hidden even from myself, the ones from my physical 6 months ago that said I needed follow-up immediately. My denial could have killed me, and now it was killing my son who was working himself to death trying to save me. I found Talia in the hallway and asked her about those white pills she'd been giving Adonis at breakfast. She broke down again, admitting they were caffeine pills and energy supplements she bought at the gas station to keep him awake for his shifts. She hadn't thought about what 200 milligrams of caffeine would do to a 12-year-old's heart and stomach. Part of me wanted to scream at her, but another part understood the desperation that made her do it, the fear of losing me that made her risk losing our son. The next morning, while we waited for Adonis to wake up, Roman Reyes called to say he'd visited the diner at dawn. He confirmed Adonis had been working there illegally for 2 months, sometimes 5 nights a week from midnight to 6 in the morning. Mel was claiming he thought Adonis was 16 because of the work permit, acting shocked when Roman showed him Adonis's real age. The labor board was already involved, and the diner was facing fines that could shut it down permanently. Roman said he'd be back to interview Adonis when he was feeling better, that this was just the beginning of a long investigation. Talia gripped my hand so tight her nails left marks in my skin, both of us watching our son sleep in that hospital bed with machines beeping around him. The machines kept beeping steady until Adonis's eyes opened around 6 in the morning, and the first thing out of his mouth was asking if I was gonna die like his friend Tommy's dad did last year, from the same kind of cancer. I grabbed his hand and promised him we'd fight this together, but no more secrets and definitely no more working, and he just started crying and saying sorry over and over for not making enough money to help. Brady came in with a stack of papers while the nurse checked Adonis's IV and started explaining how our insurance gap meant we had 0 coverage for 3 whole months, right when my symptoms started getting bad. The new insurance I got through work had a huge deductible we hadn't met yet and wouldn't cover any of the experimental treatments the doctors might want to try, so even with charity care we were looking at bankruptcy for sure. He pulled out application after application for emergency Medicaid, hospital charity programs, and drug company assistance, each one needing different documents we'd have to dig up from home like tax returns and pay stubs and bank statements. Talia and I sat at the little hospital table working through the forms together, neither of us talking, just filling out boxes and signing our names over and over while Adonis dozed. A woman in a white coat came in and introduced herself as doctor. Camilla Hudson, my new oncologist, and she scheduled my first real cancer appointment for tomorrow morning with a whole bunch of tests I couldn't even pronounce. She was nice but direct about needing staging scans right away to see how far the cancer had spread, and I signed consent forms that my brain couldn't really process because I kept thinking about Adonis asking if I was going to die. The imaging center called my cell phone to schedule my PET scan and biopsy for Thursday, and the tech on the phone explained the whole procedure. While I just nodded and said okay, even though she couldn't see me, my mind stuck on Adonis's question about dying, while everything moved way too fast and way too slow at the same time. While I was down getting my first round of tests done, Talia sat with Monica Fowler, the family therapist they assigned us, and spilled everything about how she'd contacted Mel when she got desperate for cash, telling him Adonis was really mature for 12 and could handle the work. She kept saying how lots of kids work in family businesses, so she figured it wasn't that different, except deep down she knew it was totally different. But the fear of losing me made her ignore that voice in her head, and even now with everything that happened, she still tried to defend not telling me because she thought I'd refuse treatment if I knew the cost. The next day, Adonis had to describe the night shifts to Monica, with me sitting right there listening to every awful detail about truckers who grabbed his arm. When he brought the wrong order, trays so heavy his whole body shook carrying them, burns all up his forearms from the coffee pot when his hands got too tired to hold steady. He talked about it like it was just normal stuff because Mom said it would save Dad's life, and Monica wrote down every single word for the CPS report while I sat there feeling sick. That afternoon, I drove to the bank and told them I needed to cash out my entire 401k, even with the huge penalty, and the financial advisor spent 20 minutes trying to talk me out of it, showing me charts about compound interest and retirement planning while I just kept signing papers until he finally processed the withdrawal for $30,000 that might cover 2 months of treatment if we were lucky. Roman called while I was driving home to tell me he'd been investigating the school's involvement and found out Principal Harris actually helped forge the work permit, because she thought supervised work at the diner was better than our family ending up homeless on the street, and now the school board was launching their own investigation into how this happened. When I got home, Talia was already back from the bank with rejection letters from 3 different personal loan companies, all denying her because our debt-to-income ratio was already too high with the mortgage and car payments and credit cards we'd been using for groceries. She'd stopped at the food pantry on the way home and brought in bags of canned soup and boxes of spaghetti, her face completely blank as she unpacked them into our cabinets, her pride so broken she couldn't even look at me. We ate the donated spaghetti that night in total silence, all 3 of us at the table but nobody talking, just the sound of forks on plates and Adonis wincing when the tomato sauce hit the cuts in his mouth. The phone rang right as I was clearing the plates and Dr. Hudson's office number showed on the screen. I grabbed it with shaking hands while Talia froze at the sink and Adonis watched from his chair. The nurse told me to come in tomorrow morning for my test results, and I knew from her voice it wasn't good news. That night, I laid awake feeling the pain in my gut that I'd been ignoring for months. The same pain I'd been taking 3 ibuprofen for every morning just to get through work. The next morning, we all drove to the hospital together because Talia said we needed to hear it as a family. Dr. Hudson sat us down in her small office with diplomas on the wall and a plastic skeleton in the corner. She pulled up images on her computer screen showing my insides lit up in different colors. The tumor in my colon was about the size of a golf ball, and she pointed to spots that might be spread to nearby tissue. She used words like resection and adjuvant therapy while drawing diagrams on a notepad. The surgery would remove part of my colon and check the lymph nodes to see if it spread. After surgery would come chemo, maybe radiation depending on what they found. She quoted survival rates that sounded both hopeful and scary at the same time. With treatment, stage 3 had a 60 to 70% 5-year survival rate. Without treatment, maybe 6 months to a year. Adonis started crying and grabbed my hand so tight it hurt. On the way out, Roman was waiting in the lobby with discharge papers for Adonis. The CPS monitoring meant weekly check-ins at their office downtown, no work of any kind, and mandatory counseling twice a week. Adonis looked relieved when Roman explained that adults were handling things now. The 3 of us drove home in silence, our family broken but still holding on. The next day, I had to go to my office to meet with HR about medical leave. The lady behind the desk was nice enough as she explained that family medical leave would protect my job for 12 weeks, but it was unpaid. She processed the paperwork while I did math in my head about how long our savings would last. Without my paycheck, maybe 2 months if we were careful. 3 days later, Mrs. Swan showed up at our door carrying a box of Adonis's schoolwork. She was crying before I even let her in, apologizing over and over for not doing more. She said she tried reporting her concerns 3 times, but was told to document everything and wait for more evidence. She brought all his missed assignments and worksheets, offering to come tutor him for free every Tuesday and Thursday. That evening, while Adonis was at his first counseling session, Talia finally explained everything from the beginning. The first missed insurance payment happened when I switched jobs, and there was a gap in coverage. She thought she could catch up, but then she found the test results I'd hidden in my car showing abnormal cells. Each choice seemed logical at the time, but together they almost destroyed us. She sold Adonis's things first thinking we'd buy them back. Then she heard about cash work at the diner from another mom at the school. Every decision was about keeping me alive without me knowing the cost. I wanted to stay mad, but I could see how fear made her desperate. 2 weeks later, the labor board investigator came to our house with a thick folder of violations from the diner. Mel was facing fines that would probably shut the place down, plus criminal charges for employing a minor in hazardous conditions. The investigator showed us pictures of the kitchen where Adonis worked with the deep fryer and hot surfaces marked as violations. Part of me felt good that Mel would pay, but part of me wondered where all those workers would find jobs now. Our first family counseling appointment with Monica Fowler was mostly her explaining rules while we sat on her brown couch. She made us agree to total honesty going forward no matter how hard the truth was. She said secrets almost killed this family, and honesty was the only way forward. Adonis raised his hand like he was in the school, and asked if being honest meant he could be angry at Mom for making him work. Monica said yes, all feelings were allowed here. The next week in his individual session, Adonis told Monica something that made my stomach drop. He said he heard me throwing up blood 2 months ago in the middle of the night, but didn't tell anyone because Mom said Dad needed to keep working for insurance. He thought if he worked harder and made more money, maybe I wouldn't have to work and could get better. His fear of losing me made him think losing his childhood was worth it. Monica helped him understand that wasn't his choice to make, and adults should have protected him. A month after diagnosis, Dr. Hudson called with the final staging results from all the scans and biopsies. Stage 3, a colorectal cancer, which meant it spread to nearby lymph nodes but not to other organs. She recommended starting aggressive chemo right away, followed by surgery in 3 months if the tumor shrank enough. The prognosis was cautiously optimistic if I responded well to treatment, maybe 70% chance of making it 5 years. Scheduling the chemo became a nightmare of logistics since Talia had to work and someone needed to watch Adonis after school. The treatments would be every 2 weeks for 6 months, each one taking most of the day with recovery time after. Disability payments wouldn't start for another 2 months, so Talia had to keep her job. Slowly, our neighbors and church people started offering help with rides and meals, even though we never asked. One afternoon, I sat down with Adonis in his room while he was doing homework. I told him I was sorry for not going to the doctor sooner when I noticed the blood. His pencil stopped moving and he looked up at me with eyes that seemed too old for 12. He said he saw blood in the toilet 2 months ago, but thought it was just from working too hard. We both kept secrets trying to protect each other, and it almost destroyed our family. The next day, Roman called Talia into his office downtown, while I waited with Adonis in the lobby. Through the glass door, I could see him showing her papers and her face going white. She came out shaking and grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. In the car, she told me Roman said she could face criminal neglect charges if she missed even one appointment or counseling session. The threat of losing Adonis forever changed everything about how she acted. She started keeping a calendar with every meeting circled in red and set 5 alarms on her phone for each one. My boss called that week to tell me the FMLA paperwork went through, but reminded me it was unpaid leave. We spread all our bills across the kitchen table that night, sorting them into 3 piles. The mortgage and utilities went in the must-pay pile. Credit cards and the car payment went in the delay pile. Everything else went straight to collections. Talia's hands shook as she moved each bill, and I could see her calculating how bad our credit would get. 3 days later, Roman got a call that surprised him enough to call us immediately. The older trucker from the diner wanted to testify about what he saw that night. Roman met with him, and the guy admitted he should have called someone when he first saw Adonis working there. He said he thought tipping extra was helping, but now he knew better. His testimony would help the case against Mel since he saw everything firsthand. That same week, the local news picked up the story about Principal Harris and the school board meeting. She stood at the podium admitting she failed to protect a student in her care. The board voted to demote her, but let her keep teaching, which made some parents angry. A letter arrived at our house 2 days later with her handwriting on the envelope. Talia grabbed it from the mailbox and ripped it into tiny pieces without reading it. She threw the pieces in the trash and slammed the lid shut. Monday morning, the school called because Adonis got into a fight during lunch. Some kid called Talia a criminal who should be in jail, and Adonis punched him in the face. The principal found him crying in the bathroom afterward with bloody knuckles. When I picked him up, he could barely look at me. Monica saw him that afternoon for an emergency session and helped him understand that being angry was normal after everything that happened. She taught him ways to handle the anger without hurting himself or others. Our next family counseling session focused on setting up rules for our house going forward. Monica made us write them on a poster board that we hung on the fridge. Adonis's only job was school and being a kid. Talia had to share all money decisions with me before making them. I had to tell someone immediately if I felt sick or saw blood anywhere. They seemed like simple rules, but we needed them written down to remember. The cancer center scheduled my first chemo for the following Tuesday morning. I sat in the chair while the nurse hooked up the IV and explained what would happen. The medicine went in cold and I could feel it traveling through my veins. Within 3 hours, I was throwing up everything in my stomach. Talia held a bucket under my face while I heaved and shook. She rubbed my back and whispered that she was sorry over and over between my gagging. We both ended up crying on the bathroom floor that night. 2 weeks later, the first stack of medical bills showed up in our mailbox. The total after insurance was $47,000, with more bills still coming. The charity care Brady helped us apply for covered 60%, which left us with $18,000 to pay. The billing department set up a payment plan of $200 a month for the next 10 years. Our budget was already stretched so thin that even that amount seemed impossible. I found Talia at the kitchen table one night writing on notebook paper. She crumpled it up when she saw me and threw it in the trash. After she went to bed, I pulled it out and smoothed the wrinkles. It was a letter to Adonis apologizing for making him grow up too fast and stealing his childhood. She wrote about how she would never forgive herself for what she put him through. I brought it to her the next morning and we talked about forgiveness being something that takes time. She said she wasn't ready to forgive herself yet and might never be. The days blurred together with appointments and treatments and counseling sessions that all felt like punishment, even though they were supposed to help us heal. 3 weeks later, the school called about Adonis having a meltdown during state testing. The room went dead quiet, and he just started shaking and couldn't breathe right. Mrs. Swan grabbed him and got him to the counselor's office fast, while the other kids kept taking their test. The counselor sat him on the floor and talked him through breathing exercises until his hands stopped shaking. She explained later that silence was a trigger now because the diner was always loud with truckers yelling and dishes clanging. Adonis learned to raise his hand when he felt panic coming, and the teacher would let him step into the hallway. The next Monday, Roman showed up at our door for the monthly CPS check without warning. He walked through every room taking notes on his clipboard while we followed behind, nervous. Adonis was at the school, so Roman asked to see his grades and attendance records, which Talia pulled up on the computer. Everything looked good, and Roman wrote that we were following all the requirements they set. He mentioned if we kept this up for 3 more months, he'd recommend closing our case completely. The threat of losing Adonis still hung over every single thing we did, but at least Roman seemed happy with our progress. 2 days later, we got a letter saying the labor board scheduled a hearing about the diner for next month. Our legal aid lawyer met with us at her cramped office downtown to explain what would happen. She said we'd each have to testify about what we saw and what Adonis went through working there. Adonis sat quiet the whole meeting, but I could see his leg bouncing under the table when she mentioned facing Mel in court. The lawyer said his testimony was the most important part since he was the victim. That night at dinner, we talked about whether to push for criminal charges against Mel or take whatever plea deal they offered. Adonis said he wanted Mel to go to jail for what he did, but also just wanted everything to be over. Talia thought we should let the prosecutor decide since they knew what cases actually won. I agreed because none of us really understood how the legal system worked anyway. The following week, I went for my 3-month scan to see if the chemo was working. Dr. Hudson came in with the results looking serious, which made my stomach drop. The tumor had shrunk, but not as much as she hoped it would by now. She wanted to add a stronger drug to my treatment, but warned it was expensive, and insurance probably wouldn't cover it. Brady spent hours on the phone fighting with the insurance company, while we sat in the waiting room panicking about money. They denied it twice before Brady figured out the right codes to use on the appeal. Meanwhile, our landlord taped an eviction notice to our door for being 2 months behind on rent. I called him right away and begged for more time to figure something out. He agreed to let us stay if we paid half now and set up a payment plan for the rest. The stress made my blood pressure shoot up so high that Dr. and Hudson had to adjust my other medications. Every single system seemed designed to kick you when you were already down. That Thursday was our family counseling session with Monica, and something finally broke open in Talia. She started sobbing so hard she couldn't talk for 5 whole minutes. When she finally got words out, she said she was so scared of being a widow at 38. She turned to Adonis and begged him to forgive her for making him work. She said she thought she was saving our family, but she almost destroyed it instead. Adonis sat frozen for a minute, then got up and hugged her for the first time since everything started. Monica said this was progress even if it didn't fix everything yet. The healing would take way longer than the hurting did. Over the weekend, Adonis had to write an impact statement for the labor board hearing. His teacher stayed after school to help him organize his thoughts and fix his grammar. He wrote about missing school and throwing up blood and being too tired to play with friends. He practiced reading it out loud to us over and over until he could get through it without crying. Each time he read it, he stood a little taller and spoke a little louder. His teacher told him his voice mattered and people needed to hear what happened. Sunday morning, the pastor announced the church took up a special collection for our medical bills without even asking us first. They raised $8,000 in one service, which made Talia cry with embarrassment. She kept saying we didn't deserve charity after what we did to Adonis. I reminded her that Adonis working was also charity, but the bad kind that hurt him. This was people actually helping the right way without asking for anything back. The next afternoon, the prosecutor called to explain what would probably happen with Mel's case. She said he'd most likely plead guilty to misdemeanor child endangerment to avoid trial. He wouldn't go to jail, but would pay big fines and have to pay Adonis back for all his work, plus extra for damages. It didn't feel like enough punishment, but our lawyer explained that these cases hardly ever ended with jail time. She said the difference between justice and closure was something we'd have to figure out for ourselves. That night before the hearing, we sat around the kitchen table picking at leftover pasta nobody really wanted to eat. Adonis kept folding and unfolding his impact statement, while Talia chewed her fingernails down to nothing. I watched them both trying to find the right words, but nothing came out for the longest time. Finally, Adonis said he just wanted people to know it hurt, and Talia said she wanted it over, and I said I wanted him to feel heard, and we all nodded like that fixed anything. The courthouse the next morning was smaller than I expected. Just a regular government building with metal detectors and tired security guards. We found the right room, and there was Mel already sitting with his lawyer at a table up front. He looked older somehow, his shoulders hunched forward like he was trying to make himself smaller. The judge came in and started reading case numbers and legal stuff I didn't really understand, while Adonis gripped my hand so tight it hurt. Mel's lawyer stood up first and started talking about misunderstandings and how his client thought the work permit was real and were accepted full responsibility for not checking more carefully. The judge cut him off and asked Mel directly if he knew Adonis was 12, and Mel just nodded without looking up. She ordered the maximum fines the law allowed, plus full restitution of all the money Adonis earned, plus penalties that came to almost $20,000 total. When my turn came to testify, I stood up on shaky legs and told them about finding my son at 3 a.m, about the blood and the bruises, and finding out I had cancer all in the same night. I explained how medical debt made us desperate enough that my wife thought this was the only way, how the bills kept coming faster than we could pay them. The judge listened without interrupting, sometimes writing notes, sometimes just watching my face. Then Adonis stood up with his paper shaking in his hands and read about falling asleep at his desk and throwing up blood and being too tired to play with his friends. His voice got stronger as he went, talking about carrying trays that made his arms burn and truckers who yelled at him when he was too slow. The whole courtroom went silent, except for Talia crying into her hands. The judge thanked him for being brave enough to speak up and officially ordered the full restitution amount. 2 weeks later, Roman showed up for what he said would be our last home visit before switching to monthly check-ins. He walked through the house checking that Adonis had his own bed and adequate food in the fridge and working smoke detectors. He sat down with us after and said he'd seen too many families destroyed by medical debt, that what happened to us wasn't uncommon, just usually hidden better. He reminded us that asking for help should have been the first step, not the last one, then signed the paperwork reducing our supervision. 3 months into chemo, Dr. Hudson finally said the tumor had shrunk enough to operate. She showed us the scans on her computer screen, pointing to the dark spots that had gotten smaller, but not small enough to just leave alone. She explained they'd remove part of my colon and the lymph nodes nearby to make sure they got everything. The risks were real, she said. Infection and complications and no guarantee it wouldn't come back. But doing nothing meant certain death within a year. We scheduled it for 2 weeks out. Surgery day came too fast and too slow at the same time. I kissed Talia and Adonis goodbye in the pre-op room, while nurses put IVs in both arms and made me count backwards from 10. I made it to 7. 5 hours later, I woke up with a tube down my throat and machines beeping everywhere. The surgeon was already there telling Talia they got clean margins, that it looked contained, but they wouldn't know for sure until the lab results came back. I tried to talk but couldn't around the tube, so I just squeezed her hand. They moved me to a regular room the next day, and that's when I saw the bag attached to my stomach, this clear plastic thing collecting what used to go in the toilet. The nurse showed Talia how to empty it and clean around the stoma, which is what they called the hole in my belly. For the next 3 weeks, Talia did everything for me without complaining once. She emptied that bag 4 times a day and helped me shower and change the bandages when they got gross. She treated my broken body like it was just another chore that needed doing. No big deal, even when I could see her fighting not to gag. Adonis brought his homework to my room every afternoon and did it sitting in the visitor chair, keeping me company without needing to talk much. Around that same time, Monica found a support group at the hospital for kids with sick parents. Adonis didn't want to go at first, but we made him try it once. He came back talking nonstop about this kid whose mom had MS and another whose dad had a brain tumor. He said they understood what it was like to be scared all the time that your parent might die. He went back the next week on his own. Then the letter came from the emergency grant Brady had applied for months ago. $15,000 approved for medical debt relief. Combined with the church fundraiser and the charity care discount, we were down to about $18,000 total. Still massive, but Brady helped us set up a payment plan we could actually manage without losing the house. We'd be paying $150 a month for 10 years, but we'd make it work somehow. 2 days later, I got the call from HR while sitting in the hospital cafeteria eating a dry sandwich. They confirmed my job was protected under FMLA, but said the promotion I'd been up for went to someone else since I couldn't commit to the travel schedule. I told them I understood and hung up feeling grateful just to have a job to go back to when this was all over. That same week, the school board held an emergency meeting about our case, and Principal Harris stood up in front of everyone to explain how she'd failed to report what she knew about Adonis working. The board voted to implement new mandatory reporting policies with direct hotlines to CPS and required training for all teachers on recognizing child labor signs. Adonis watched the news coverage from his spot on the couch and said maybe other kids wouldn't have to go through what he did. Brady came by the house 3 days later with a stack of paperwork and started walking us through all the community resources available. He signed us up for the food bank that delivered boxes every Tuesday, got our electric bill reduced through a hardship program, and enrolled us in free counseling sessions at the cancer center. We sat at the kitchen table filling out forms while he explained each program, and I realized we'd been too proud to ask for help that had been there all along. The following Monday, Roman showed up for what he said would be our final official CPS visit. He walked through the house checking off items on his clipboard and asking Adonis questions about school and home life. After an hour, he sat us all down in the living room and said the final report would recommend closing our case with just periodic courtesy checks. He shook our hands and told us we were one of the families that actually made it through together, even if we had scars to show for it. 3 weeks after surgery, the pathology report finally came back and Dr. Hudson called me personally to deliver the news. The margins were completely clean with no lymph node involvement, which was the best possible outcome we could have hoped for. She recommended preventive chemo just to be safe and said insurance had surprisingly approved it without a fight this time. My prognosis shifted from guarded to genuinely optimistic, and I hung up the phone feeling like I could breathe for the first time in months. That Thursday night, we had our first normal dinner in what felt like forever, with no talk of bills or doctors or court dates. Adonis complained about his math homework, while Talia laughed at my terrible joke about the hospital food. We were eating spaghetti from the food pantry again, but it tasted better than any fancy meal because we were sitting together at our table without the weight of secrets crushing us. I watched my wife and son talking about normal things and realized this was what healing looked like. The next afternoon, a package arrived addressed to Adonis with no return label. Inside was his signed baseball from his 10th birthday that we'd sold months ago to the pawn shop. A note said the community had pooled money to buy it back for him after hearing our story. Adonis held it in both hands, staring at the signatures before walking into my room and placing it on my nightstand next to my medications. He said he wanted it where we could both see it every day, as a reminder that some things could be recovered, even after we thought they were gone forever. Looking at my family gathered in my hospital room that evening, I understood that honesty had become more than just a new rule for us. It was the foundation we were using to rebuild everything that had broken when we tried to carry our burdens alone. We'd survived cancer and exploitation and the betrayal of keeping secrets from each other. We were scarred from the fight and poor from the bills and would be paying off debt for years to come. But we were together in that room with Adonis doing homework in the chair and Talia organizing my medications, and that was enough for today. All right, I'm calling it there. I'm off to raid the fridge and check comments. Subscribe if you want to hang out again.